everyone, I'm Miss Adriana, and today we're going to be doing a winter wall art project. This is basically using watercolor, so I'm going to take you step by step through the process of recreating this winter wall art project. First, let's get to a supply list, so I'll see you in a moment. To recreate the scene, you're going to need some supplies. So let's run through the list of supplies that you're going to need for this project. Number one, you are going to need some paper. So I do recommend that you do get some watercolor paper, as it is very thick. It's like thicker than cardstock, and that way it can hold all the water that you're going to be putting on this. Since you are going to be adding a bit of watercolor to this, you will need a paper that holds the water fairly well. Of course, you're going to need some watercolors. So I have two different sets here. I have the Koi watercolors, which I got at Michael's. I think with a coupon it was under $20, so it wasn't too bad. And I like that this one has like a pull-out tray that I can mix color in. As you can see, I've mixed some color there before, and you can put it in different positions as well. So there's various ways to put it. I usually like doing it like this. And it comes with a nice variety of colors. These are like half pans, and they've lasted a fairly long time for me. But they're very good. I do like these colors. They're nice and saturated. And then I have this Paul Rubens watercolor palette that I bought on Amazon. I really like this one. Has some really beautiful colors, and it comes with a little like swatch paper for you. And then it opens up like this, so you do have some sections where you can mix colors. You can see I've done a lot of mixing. These are full half pans, so they're a lot bigger. There's a lot of color in here. So you will need watercolor. You don't have to break the bank. You can use, the Crayola brand. Anything that you have on hand, you can try it out just to learn some of these techniques. Of course, you're going to need some brushes, and there's a lot of different variety of brushes that you can use. There's natural fiber brushes, there's synthetic fiber brushes. I particularly like this brand. This is called Grace Art. This pack I think was under $10, and it comes with a lot more. I only pulled out a few for this project, but it's got some rounded brushes with the like nice tips at the end, and it also comes with like flat head brushes and things like that. So there's a variety of sizes here that I'm going to be using. These two are from Paul Rubens, and I like these just because they're very soft, and you can add a lot of layers of color with these. They're very big, but they can get very pointed at the end, so you can still make detailed strokes. So you will need some brushes. You can also get some of these little like mixing pots. I got this at the dollar store. It was like a pack of 6 or 10 for $1. So, these are great for if you want to mix additional colors. I like these because they're deep, so the color doesn't go everywhere. You're going to need some tape, and this is basically to adhere your paper to a surface. So be careful where you are putting your paper, because depending on the type of tape, and I do recommend either using painter's tape or masking tape. Anything beyond that, it's going to be too sticky and it's going to ruin your paper. But you also don't want to ruin the surface. So right now I have a cutting mat that's right here, but you can, use a garbage bag, use, a table that you don't care that it gets messed up, or you can lay down a cutting board or something like that so that you won't mess up your tables. Of course, you're going to need some cups to put water. So I usually do 2 or 3 cups depending on the project. If I have like light colors, then I'll clean my brushes in one, and then darker colors in another, and then I usually have one for clean water. So you want to make sure you have a couple different little cups, and you can use bowls or whatever. And then also you're going to need your trusty paper towels, because you can get pretty messy with this. So, you know, definitely gonna need something to clean up and then to dry your brushes. You know, and I do recommend that once you're finished with projects, you do fairly well rinse your brushes, and then once in a while you do want to give them a very thorough cleaning. I have a brush cleaner soap at home, but you can use, you know, probably I would recommend shampoo instead of just dish soap. And then you want to dry them flat. You don't want to dry them this way, especially not this way, because you will ruin the glue that's in here with the water. But you can also dry them this way, you know, hanging down. But I usually dry them flat and it's fairly fine, or I can put something underneath them and just kind of dry them. And then I just kind of reshape them at the end. Once I'm done cleaning them, I just kind of get them to a point. Okay, so that's a tip on brushes. So I love using this cutting mat for a couple reasons. Number one is that I can kind of measure where to put my tape, and it gives me grid lines so that I can, you know, put my tape evenly around the edges. So I'm gonna cut some pieces here, and then I'm gonna use this grid to kind of lay them out as straight as I can. I'm using 5x7 paper from, and I'm trying to remember the name, Beaches or Beetles, I cannot remember at the moment, but I bought it on Amazon. It was a huge pack. I've used Arteza paper as well. That's okay. It just has a lot more texture than I like sometimes. This one is less textured, and I really like that. So you may be wondering why I'm adhering my paper to a surface. Well, the main reason is that once we start adding water, this paper is going to want to buckle, it's going to want to warp, and it's going to make things a lot harder for me to paint. So by adhering it to a surface, and at home I actually use clipboards. I have a small clipboard, then I have a very large clipboard, depending on the paper size. But what I do like is adhering it to the surface, and that way the paper doesn't kind of go all over the place. Because first what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working wet on wet. So what that means is I'm going to wet my surface, and then I'm going to add color, okay? So one thing to kind of take note of is before you do start watercoloring, I like to activate my colors, and by activating I mean I add some water to the colors, so that way that, you know, the pigment will start to dissolve into more of a liquid state. So I'm going to do that. That's going to take me a couple of minutes, so I will see you back in a couple minutes. Okay, now that I have activated my colors, as you can see, I added a little bit of water here and there to the colors I wanted to use. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is kind of wet down my paper. And then I'm going to start mixing a little bit of colors for the top of the painting, which is the sky. So you want to load up your brush with clean water, okay? And then you just kind of want to go along the surface. Now, if you're working like on a clipboard and you're not sure like how much water should you add, one rule of thumb is if you're working like off of a clipboard is if you kind of put the paper more vertical and there's water pooling at the edge, then that means there's too much water. If it's laid down on a surface like this, you just want to make sure that it's not getting into these like little warpy pools of water. And basically what I'm doing is I'm just adding a single layer of water to kind of just wet my surface so that it's ready for me to add watercolor. And sometimes you will get like little pieces of your brush may come off. You can probably get those off fairly quickly. So now that I have wet my paper, I'm gonna let it dry momentarily while I start mixing some color. So last time I used a lot of blues and I added a little bit of green. This time I think I'm going to add a little bit of green as well. So I'm going to take some of these blues and start mixing my colors. I'm going to use, I think, this palette here to mix a little bit more. And this color is very pretty. Let's add some of this color here. All right, so what we're gonna do first is we are gonna create kind of our horizon. And for this image, I'm using about a third of the way down. So from here to about a third of the way down is where I'm selecting to put my horizon. And I am going to singly stroke color across. One thing to take note of is you can make some judgments about what you would like it to look. So if you want a really smooth, almost gradient type of sky, then what you want to do is you want to lay down your color and you don't want to touch it with your brush anymore. If you want to speckle it a bit or get some texture in there, then you can kind of stroke against the color and pick up some of the color and create a little bit of texture. So that is really up to you. So I'm going to use the softer brush, and I'm going to add a lot more water to this because this is really dark. I'll probably pick up some from here. There we go. And basically you want to gauge the color yourself. Whatever you like, whatever you feel like doing. You know, you can do purple skies if you want. You don't have to follow the color schemes that I'm using. So basically, I'm just taking color and I'm going down to about a third of the way down. And then I'm going to do one single stroke across to kind of really get that line. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry because I need to add the trees on top. So I don't want to work the trees on a wet surface. So we're going to let this dry and then I will see you back in a couple minutes. Okay, so we are about dry. Basically what I am looking at is that if I press down lightly on my paper, I'm not picking up a lot of color or my finger doesn't feel really wet. It's still going to be kind of damp, but that's okay. One thing is that you can use a blow dryer if you'd like. Just be careful if it's like really wet and you go at it with the blow dryer, it will spread the color around like in a burst. So you want to either use what I did, I just fanned the other sheets of paper across it for a couple minutes. We're going to start on our background trees. So for that, I'm going to use a smaller brush. So this is a number 4 brush. And what we're going to be doing is the little trees that peek out in the background. So in this image, I did them a little bigger. In this rendition, they're a little smaller. You can decide how big or small you want your trees. And then what we're going to start doing is we're going to kind of lay the stalks of the tree first. So we're basically positioning them. And we're going to take the very tip of our brush and we're just going to create a line. And then we're going to create some spaced out lines and they're going to be various heights just to indicate where our trees are going. I pressed down a little too hard at that point, so that's why it's spread out a little bit, but we can save that. It's usually why I like having a paper towel here, because sometimes it helps to reshape the brush. So what I do is I kind of just put the paper down and then I just like roll my brush across it to get my point to be very pointy again. Okay, so this technique of creating the trees, I'm probably gonna start picking up random colors here, because I don't want them all to be exactly the same color, and I'm probably gonna add a little bit of green in a moment. So we'll start here with this one. So the technique that I'm using is I'm basically putting my wrist kind of almost flat down on my surface, and then my brush is kind of parallel or vertical from the surface, and I'm using the very point of my brush to kind of do these like little zigzag patterns. And as I go down the the trunk of the tree, I'm getting out further and further and just creating these little zigzag patterns. And that's going to give us our tree, as you can see there. Okay. And now I'm going to start mixing in maybe a little bit darker, because I don't want these trees to all be the same color. Maybe add a little bit of green to this one. Alright, and then we are going to again start at the top, and we're just going to zigzag with the very point of our brush. And there we have a tree forming. And then we can go towards the top and make those little brushes. Okay, that looks good. Gonna clean off my brush a tiny bit and then remake my little point, because that's exactly what I'm using, is just the point of my brush. Okay. And then we have one peeking out back here, and if they're on top of each other, that's completely fine. And again, I'm randomly mixing colors on each time that I'm going in for another tree, just so that they are very random in color, that they have variation, because trees don't all look the same. There we go, creating a nice little Christmas tree. This is a fun and very easy project to work on, and I actually found it through another person that does a lot of watercolor, and I really loved their paintings, so I was kind of looking at what they were doing and found this little project. So there is a lot of artists on YouTube that do watercolor, and I love following them because they give me such great ideas to kind of recreate projects. So as you can see, we have a lot of variation in tone here and in color. So not all my trees are the same color, which is great, because if you ever look out at the forest, you don't see a lot of trees that are the same color. There's some that are a little more blue, there's some that are a little more green, some with more red and things like that. We're kind of staying within the green and blue spectrum in this, but that's perfectly fine. So now we're going to create the bigger trees, so these here. And again, you can put them wherever you like. You can map them out wherever you would like. I'm going to probably put one here and then again one here. But for this, I'm going to kind of go up in size, so I'm going to use a size 8 brush. I've already dipped this in a lot of color, so I'm going to clean this off. There we go. And I'm just going to roll it across my paper towel to get my point back in order. So I'm going to try to grab some of this lighter color, because one thing with the bigger trees is if you make the line too thick, you will see it underneath your watercolor. So I really want this line to be light. So I'm going to create this line. There we go. And then we're going to start mixing some color. a little bit of that. And as you can see, we've got a nice point there. So I'm going to put down my point, and very lightly again, we're going to create these little zigzag patterns. Now with these bigger trees, you are going to probably have to pick up color halfway through, or even less than halfway through. And you can vary the color, it's completely fine. And again, we're just going back and forth and kind of creating these slightly downward zigzags. I'm trying not to press into the paper at all or too hard. There we go. So we've got a nice little chunky tree there. And then what I can do is I can go in with my brush and kind of create a little bit more detail at the edges. Like if I want my tree branches to be a little spikier, I can just really lightly kind of go with the tip of my brush to create some spikiness in these branches. And this will also create a little bit of texture for you. Now one thing that you do want to do is once you've laid down your tree like this, is you want to take a clean brush, dip it in water, and then we're going to stroke across the bottom. And what that's going to do is we're trying to pick up some of that color from the tree and give it a little bit of shadow, but also give it kind of a base to sit on. And I'm just kind of pulling that color down, and if I feel that I need to darken it, I can, but I think we're fine. There we go. It's very light on camera, but you can see it better with the naked eye. So now we're gonna go in and do our second tree, and for this one I think I'm gonna add a lot more green. I think I really want this one to kind of pop with green. Alright, so now I'm going to kind of lay this one out here. And I may bring this one up high. Probably about there. And it's okay if you go over the other trees that you already have down. That's completely fine. They should be dry enough at this point for you to be able to go over them. All right, so we are going to again zigzag. So little points up and then zigzag across in a downward motion. And I'm gonna darken this color up a bit. There we go. Just because I don't want the other trees to really poke through too much. And this one's going to be a little thinner than our little chunky friend next door. And again, picking up color. And this one is very vibrant. The color is very saturated. There we go. And now I'm going to take my clean brush before this gets too dry, and I'm going to, again, stroke down and kind of into this other tree. There we go. And I'm going to take my brush and just kind of go in here and create a little bit of texture. I'm just using the very point of my brush and kind of stroking outward. So now we have our trees laid out. The last thing we really can do, which is something that I did with all of these, is to add some snow. And so what we're going to be using is kind of a mix of, it's called gouache. It's white gouache. This one is in titanium white. And it's basically almost like watercolor, except it's a little thicker and it lays on quite opaque. So you can also mix this with water and then kind of get a very, transparent looking droplet. So I'm going to mix this up a little bit, and I'm going to let this dry a little bit. So I'll see you back in a minute. And so what I'm doing is I'm picking up my color, and it's fairly thick on my brush. As you can see, it's really thick. And then I'm just kind of plopping it sideways and creating like where snow has built up on the branches and things like that. So, you can kind of follow your own logic and your own path and just add snow wherever you like. A little more. Wherever you feel like the snow would end up, that's where you want to put your snow. So I'm going to do this to this big guy in big drops. There we go. Maybe add a little bit there. And then I'm going to use the very watered down side to add a little bit of snow to these guys back here. Since, they got snowed on as well. And for this, I'm using a little bit more of the point of the brush, and my brush is a little more vertical to the paper. Okay, there we go. So we've got some nice snowy trees. Now what I'm going to do is I want to add kind of a snow effect. Sorry, couldn't talk there for a second. So I'm going to add a little more water to my watered down side. And this is where things can get kind of messy, so be careful. And what I'm going to do is I've loaded it up with a lot of paint. I'm just kind of like making sure it's fully saturated with paint. And then I'm holding it horizontal to my paper and then tapping, tapping, tapping. All right. So there we have added our snow. So now everything is kind of speckled. I've got white on me and there's white everywhere, but it's creating a little bit of a snowy effect, meaning that the snow is still falling down. And that kind of completes our project. So as you can see, this is a fairly simple project to recreate. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this program. If you decide to make this at home, I hope that you would share it with us on social media, and you can do that at Instagram using the hashtag FountaindaleLIB. If you want to see more great programs like this, definitely visit us at fountaindale.org/events. See you next time.